and I'm guessing, I should look this up, I gotta guess he was one of the youngest senators ever. He runs at 29 in 1910 and wins a seat in the United States Senate. He doesn't mess around, he goes for the gold. And he wins the Senate seat at the age of 29. Well, this is kind of interesting. While he's in the Senate during the election of 1912, in which Woodrow Wilson is running against his own cousin, Theodore Roosevelt, who does Franklin Roosevelt support? You'd think he'd support his cousin, but he doesn't. He supports Woodrow Wilson for president. Doesn't support his cousin. And who goes on to win that election by a pretty big landslide? Woodrow Wilson. And what does Franklin Roosevelt get for his efforts? The same thing that Theodore Roosevelt got for his efforts when he campaigned for William McKinley. What did Theodore Roosevelt get out of that deal? Do you remember? What position did he get? No, it had to do with the Philippines, remember? During the war with Spain? Assistant Secretary of the Navy. I'll be darned, ironically, if that isn't the same position that Woodrow Wilson gave Franklin Roosevelt. Because of his help in the election of 1912, he appointed him Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Isn't that kind of ironic when you think about it? Both men served in that position. Well, you probably don't need to write this down because you should know this. Roosevelt ran for the vice presidency in 1920 with James M. Cox. They were defeated. And what did he do after his loss in 1920? He went back to private life. Got out of politics for a little while, just went back to private life. Did he have to worry about money? No. So he went back to private life. Life of leisure. Well, in August of 1921, he went with his family to their summer home in Canada. In August of 1921, Franklin Roosevelt goes with his family to their summer home in Canada. And on the 9th of August, he falls into the water while sailing, and he becomes chilled. Gets cold, just gets a chill on him. So on August 9th of 1921, while they're at their summer home in Canada, Franklin Roosevelt's out sailing. He falls off the sailboat into the lake, and he gets a chill. The next day, on August 10th, he gets up and he's feeling really tired. So to refresh himself, to get himself going, he went and took a swim in the lake, which was fairly cold. And when he got done, instead of being refreshed and ready to go, he actually was more tired than he was before he took the swim. So the next day on August 10th, he's feeling tired in the morning. He decides to go swimming in the lake to refresh himself. When he finished and went back to the house, he was more tired than he was prior. Well, the next morning, on August 11th, he's noticing that neither one of his legs are working properly. Neither one of his legs are working properly, he notices on the morning of August 11th. And he doesn't know really what to think, and so he just kind of hangs on, right? Well, by the next morning of August 12th, he is suffering from severe pain. He can't stand up or move his legs, and his arms and hands become partially paralyzed. There's something wrong with this guy, right? So on August 12th, he gets up, he's in severe pain, he can't stand up or move his legs, and he notices that his arms and hands become partially paralyzed. So he's thinking, I better go seek medical attention here to see what's going on. So he decides to seek that medical attention and would be later diagnosed with polio at the age of 39. He would be later diagnosed with polio, which was a very common disease until they found a vaccine. You ever listen to Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire? Vaccine is in the song, and that's what they're talking about, polio vaccine. Well, Roosevelt works very hard in therapy. He tries like crazy to improve the condition he's in. He is going to regain the use of his hands and his arms and his shoulders, but his legs are never going to improve as much as they needed to. From that point on, he would never walk again without help or the use of leg braces from the time he was 39. So he seeks medical attention. They find out he's got polio at the age of 39. He works very hard in rehab. He does gain control of his arms and hands and shoulders through his hard work, and his legs do improve a little bit, but he's never going to walk again without help or the use of braces. Quite a physical setback. Most people would say, boy, I got a lot of money here, I'm just going to relax and take it easy and get on with life. Not him. He decides to get back into politics. He decides to get back into politics. And what's he run for and win that we've already talked about? Governor of New York. He runs and becomes governor of New York, which really sets the stage for him to be the Democratic candidate in 1932. And we know what happened there, right? Okay? So he's elected governor of New York. He's re-elected governor of New York, and by 1932 he has got his eyes set on the presidency. He gets the Democratic nomination easily and defeats incumbent President Hoover easily to win the presidency. He will go on to be elected in 1936, 1940, and 1944. He will be the only president in American history to be elected to 4 terms as President of the United States. Now, between the time he was elected president and the time he took office, from November of 29 to November of 32 to March of 33, he decides to take a vacation to Florida. But he is the president-elect, so he's getting a little attention, right? And on February 15th of 1933, while in Miami, Florida, he decides to give a speech from the back of his automobile, which was a convertible, okay? So he decides he's going to, before he's inaugurated as president, he's going to go to Miami, Florida for a little bit of a vacation. He decides to give a speech there on February 15th, 1933, from the back of the automobile. Well, as the president-elect is delivering his speech, an unemployed bricklayer named Giuseppe Zangara shouts, "Too many people are starving," and fires 6 shots toward Roosevelt with a revolver. So again, on February 15th, 1933, Roosevelt decides to deliver a speech in Miami, Florida from the back of his automobile. As the president-elect is delivering that speech, an unemployed bricklayer named Giuseppe Zangara shouts, "Too many people are starving," and fires 6 shots toward President-elect Roosevelt from a revolver. Of the 6 shots fired, 5 different people were hit. 5 different people were hit. So the 6 shots he takes, Zangara, 5 people are hit. Roosevelt escapes without being hit. But the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, who was there with Roosevelt, is hit in the stomach and later dies of the wound. So Roosevelt's not hit by any of those shots, but the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, received a mortal stomach wound in the attack. In other words, he was shot in the stomach, later died. Now, the reason Roosevelt may not have been hit is because of a bystander, a woman by the name of Lillian Cross. And what Lillian Cross did is she saw Zangara pull a gun out and begin to shoot. And she actually tried to grab him, but she was too late. But she was able to swat his arm as he was firing the pistol. And that action probably saved President-elect Roosevelt from being hit. So again, A woman by the name of Lillian Cross saw Zangara pull his gun, actually tried to grab him, swatted his arm just as he was shooting, which resulted in the president-elect probably not being hit. Now several men tackled Zangara and started to beat him, and probably might have beat the guy to death if Roosevelt hadn't stepped in and said, hey, let's leave justice to the authorities. And as a result of that command, so to speak, the crowd let him go, and he was taken into custody. But stories are that they were just beating the devil out of him. Maybe wouldn't have survived the beating he would take. Well, he's taken into custody, and he's tried for attempted murder, and his sentence for attempted murder is 80 years in prison. So he's initially tried for attempted murder and sentenced to 80 years in prison. However, when Mayor Cermak died of peritonitis, which is an infection of the stomach or abdomen, Zangara was retried and sentenced to death by the electric chair. So he was initially tried for attempted murder. He was sentenced to 80 years in prison, but after Mayor Cermak died, Zangara was retried and sentenced to death. So on March 5th of 1933, they stuck him into Old Sparky, that's what they called him. Stuck him into Old Sparky, the electric chair, and put him to death. Well, during his fourth term as president, we're kicking ahead a little bit, he decides to go to Warm Springs, Georgia for a little vacation. He's pooped out, what do we write toward the end of? World War II. A lot of pressure. Decisions got to be made if we're going to invade mainland Japan or not after we win in the Pacific. And he decides to take a vacation. And on April 12th of 1945, he's working at his desk while an artist is painting his portrait. Okay? On April 12th of 1945 in Warm Springs, Georgia, on vacation, President Roosevelt sitting at his desk working while an artist is painting his portrait. According to the artist, who was the only other one in the room, Roosevelt whispered, "I have a terrible headache," and simply fell over in his chair. So according to the artist that was painting Roosevelt's portrait, as he sat at his desk working, President Roosevelt whispered, "I have a terrible headache," and fell over in his chair. A few hours later, President Franklin Roosevelt died of a cerebral hemorrhage and was buried at Hyde Park, New York. What do you have, a cerebral hemorrhage? What's that mean?
Means you have a blood clot.
Blood clot or blood vessel breaks in your brain. Had a terrible headache and died of a cerebral hemorrhage. And he was buried at Hyde Park, New York. Now, that's the note-taking for the day, but I want to make one more point. So when he dies early in his fourth term, toward the end of World War I, Vice President Harry S. Truman inherits not only the presidency, but the war. And he's kind of little known from Missouri. Now, I think he's one of the most courageous presidents in American history because he's got to make a decision. Do we continue to fight World War I and invade mainland Japan, which it was estimated 1 million American soldiers would perish in that assault? 1 million. Or does he drop the atomic bomb on innocent civilians and kill a couple 100,000 rather than lose 1 million GIs in war? That's the decision he made. And I ended the war. And I think it was very courageous. I think we do not give Truman near enough credit. Okay? All right, well, we'll continue on tomorrow with the 100 days. and we'll start telling you how Roosevelt starts solving these problems of unemployment and banking and all the kind of stuff that we're in trouble with.